Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and today I want to give you some tips and tricks for your takeoff rotation. A lot of flight simulators seem to rotate quite excessively, which either results in a tail strike or in getting airborne with too little speed, or which just makes for an unstable flight path. Now, today let's talk about what Boeing recommends, how you should rotate in the Boeing 737, and then we're also going to have a look at a practical example with a couple of tips and tricks from my experience flying the aircraft. But let's start with a little bit of theory from the flight crew training manual. Takeoff speeds are established based on minimum control speed, stall speed, and tail clearance margins. Shorter-bodied airplanes are normally governed by stall speed margin, while longer-bodied airplanes are normally limited by a tail clearance margin. When a smooth continuous rotation is initiated at VR, tail clearance margin is assured because computed takeoff speeds depicted in the performance in-flight chapter of the AFCOM, Airport Analysis, or FMC, are developed to provide adequate tail clearance. Above 80 knots, relax the forward control column pressure to the neutral position. For optimum takeoff and initial climb performance, initiate a smooth continuous rotation at VR towards 15 degrees of pitch attitude. However, takeoffs at low thrust setting, which means low excess energy, will result in a lower initial pitch attitude target to achieve the desired climb speed. The use of stabilizer trim during rotation is not recommended. After liftoff, use the attitude indicator or indications on the PFD or head-up display as the primary pitch reference. The flight director, in conjunction with indicated airspeed and other flight instruments, is used to maintain the proper vertical flight path. Note, the flight director pitch command is not used for rotation. With a consistent rotation technique where the pilot uses approximately equal control forces and similar visual cues, the resultant rotation rate differs slightly depending upon airplane body length. Note, do not adjust takeoff speeds or control forces to compensate for increased body length. Use the technique above. Resultant rotation rates vary from 2 to 3 degrees per second, with rates being lowest on longer airplanes. Liftoff attitude is achieved in approximately 3 to 4 seconds, depending on airplane weight and thrust settings. So, let's have a look into how we can put that into practical commands. In the 737 there is one special type, which is the 737-800, which is the one that we're sitting in right now. In the 737-800, when we have a look outside, once the nose reaches about 7.5 to 8 degrees, the elevator enters the downwash of the wings, thereby reducing elevator effectiveness. At about 10 degrees pitch during the rotation, the elevator is getting out of that range again, and therefore your elevator is regaining its effectiveness. Let's have a look at the control column to see how a typical rotation would look like in a Boeing 737. You basically start pulling backwards, and by the time the airplane lifts off, just freeze the control column in position. Reaching about 7.5 degrees, you gotta pull a little bit more, and at about 10 degrees, you gotta relax back to the original position in order to maintain a constant rotation rate. The biggest failure that flight simmers do go through during their rotation is they just do this. They just pull quickly back in order to get the nose into the air. That is exactly what we are not supposed to do. So start rotating slowly at VR. Remember, the rotation speed VR is not the speed where the nose is supposed to lift off. It is the speed where you're supposed to initiate the rotation, so where you start slowly pulling back on the control column in order to get the nose up. It can take a little longer until the nose is actually rising, and that is not a problem at all. So when we start to pull back on the control column, we are still looking outside towards the end of the runway. Eventually we will see the airplane start lifting up below our point of view, and when that happens we slowly transition our view onto the attitude indicator, which we are then going to use for the remainder of the rotation until we reach the initial pitch target. Regardless which airplane you fly, it is important that you know your pitch targets. For example, on both the 737 and the Airbus A330, the target is 15 degrees of pitch, and with an engine failure it reduces to about 12.5 degrees pitch, and with an A330 at max takeoff weight it becomes a little bit less, like 11 degrees. So when you start transitioning onto a new type, Those are numbers that you need to remember. Alright, now that we've spoken about some theory, let's go ahead and have a look at a practical example of how we can put this into reality. So, we are going to start our takeoff, and initially we're just going to look outside, with occasional glimpses inside to have a look at our airspeed, which aids in decision making in case of a rejected takeoff. Now, by the time we have the 80 knots call, we know that we are go-minded, so we are minded to continue the takeoff unless a significant malfunction occurs, but more on that in a separate video. Now, by the time we hear V1, we are mentally prepared to start the rotation, and once the rotate call comes, we are slowly going to start pulling back on the control column. Slowly, like this, until the nose eventually starts lifting off the ground. Note that load sheets are not always accurate, so it can very well happen that in some rotations the airplane starts coming up a little bit earlier, in other rotations it starts coming up a little bit later. The same goes, for example, for different thrust settings, etc. Alright, so that much about the theory. In short, we look to the end of the runway, with occasional glimpses on the speed indicator to check how fast we are going. By the time we hear rotate, we are smoothly going to pull back on the control column until the nose starts coming up. Now here is what I recommend you to do. Once your nose starts coming up, you're going to transition your point of view onto the attitude indicator. Now, remember we are supposed to take approximately 5 seconds to reach our lift-off attitude and to reach our initial climb attitude. Liftoff after 3 to 4 seconds, then 15 degrees pitch after roughly 5 seconds, with a rotation rate of 2.5 to 3 degrees a second. Basically, we can say that the nose is supposed to come up by one of the markers on the ADI for every second. Now, you will again see that many flight simulators are rotating much too quickly, so take it very slow, force yourself to make things slow and deliberate. Alright, in this particular example I will demonstrate just how slow you can actually rotate the airplane. And we are going to do that by just pulling back on the control column very slightly. Eventually, once the nose starts coming up, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the primary flight display so that we can have a closer look at what exactly is happening. Alright, you ready to go? Take off. So, for the takeoff, initially I'm going to zoom out a little so that you can see the control column in action. Stabilized. Set takeoff thrust. A little bit forward input on the column there. Thrust set. Slowly relaxing to neutral, reaching neutral at 80 knots. Alright, now watch it as we are approaching VR. Okay, slowly pull back until the nose starts coming up. Here we go. Now looking inside. And look at that. Look at the primary flight display. That's how you do it. That slowly is how you rotate the airplane. Right then, gear up. And from here on we're going to continue with the normal after takeoff procedures. Might have to retrim the plane a little bit. And from here on we can also make use of the flight directors. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I do hope that you learned something on this. If you did, do let me know in the comments below. Looking forward to read your take on this one, and in the meantime I'd like to say thank you very much for watching. See you all again on the next one. And remember, if you're up for more, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Finally, if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.